Minister wanted information in relation to our plan as per the Programme for Government commitment to sign the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities.
Thank you very much, Deputy, for raising that very important question. And you are quite correct in saying it is a part of our commitment for Programme for Government. The optional protocol to the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disability is an international treaty that establishes two procedures aimed at strengthening the implementation and monitoring of the Convention. The first is an individual communication procedure allowing individuals to bring petitions to the committee claiming breaches of their rights, and the second is an inquiry procedure giving committee authority to undertake inquiries of grave or systemic violations of the Convention. The Programme for Government reiterates the commitment to ratify the optional protocol after the first reporting cycle. At a recent sitting of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Disability Matters, the Secretary-General of my department advised members that both I and my colleague Minister O'Gorman are open to an earlier ratification of the optional protocol. Our intention is to prepare for ratification of the optional protocol once the Assisted Making Decision Capacity Act 2015 has been commenced and the Decision Support Services is operational. This is scheduled to take place in June or July of next year. A detailed process is needed to ensure that Ireland's legislative provision and redress mechanisms are sufficient to meet the obligations that will arise once Ireland opts into the optional protocol. The Department of Children, Equality, Disability Integration and Youth will work intensively to ensure that we can meet these obligations. The Government recognises the importance of ensuring that people with disabilities have all the appropriate channels to vindicate their rights. I am advancing the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Amendment Bill, which includes provisions necessary to enable the reform of capacity law contained in the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act 2015 to become operational. Minister Gorman has separately announced a review of the equality legislation which prohibits discrimination, including against persons with disabilities. The new review is intended to assess whether or not the equality legislation continues to be effective in protecting people against discrimination. Minister O'Gorman will bring forward legislative proposals, if necessary, thereafter to strengthen the provision of this legislation.
Thank you, Minister. Just to firstly acknowledge your own work in this field since you were appointed, not just as Minister, but indeed as spokesperson on disability back in 2016. And that you're actually actioning a lot of what you called for in government. We just acknowledge that. Just in relation to the earlier ratification, have you a timeline on that, or is it completely dependent on the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act? You say that that Act might be in place by next June or July. Is that a firm commitment that it will be done before the end of next year's summer session? Or is it dependent on the work that both you and Minister Gorman are doing within your departments? You don't need to know. You know directly yourself the frustrations of people with disabilities and people with additional needs, that we have signing all these charters, but it's not making any difference to their day-to-day experience of services. That these are all gold standard flag-waving occasions, but the lived experience of people with disabilities and people with additional needs is actually worsening. And I want to particularly acknowledge the work you've done on clearing assessment waiting lists, because children with disabilities and their parents are going through the ringer, are continuing to go through the ringer on a daily basis, despite all of what we're signing up to.
Thank you again, Deputy. There's three elements to this. The first element was securing funding last year in the budget, which Minister O'Gorman successfully got, to ensure that we had the funding to recruit the staff to go in to working on the decision support services. That is in train. The funding was got in excess of 3 million, and that work is underway to ensure that we deliver on target for June to July of next year, that we have the decision support services in place. The next part of that is the legislation that we are bringing forward in this session in relation to the Amendment Bill 2015. That is actually to put the legal footing in place. So we need to have all those elements, and the next part is the report that is going, the UN report that is going before Cabinet as well, the publication of that. We are on target at this moment in time for next June or July. And once those three pathways are cleared, we then are in a position to follow up on what the Secretary-General said before the Oireachtas Committee in working towards the publication of the joint, the optional protocol.
We're on target. I also don't expect either you or Minister Gorman to give a sight of the budget, but I want to acknowledge the extra investment, but that's not being seen on the ground, and we've had this conversation. It seems to go into a big black hole, and the lived experience continues to worsen and to disimprove. So maybe when we're publishing the budget, yes, there is extra resources, but where's it going? Like the Federation of Voluntary Providers are telling me that they are in the worst state that they have been for many years because they haven't had the capacity to fundraise as a consequence of COVID, and that fundraising was the difference between them being able to provide a service and them being able to assist families in very hard situations. So we're going to have massive billions and millions announced on Tuesday and then ultimately in a service plan. But we need to see where that's being spent. We need to see, is that going to help our communities, our families? So as you finalise your budget this weekend, can you keep that in mind? Billions mean nothing if you are not getting respite, if your child can't get a place in school, if you can't go to your local town without having to, as we saw during Make Way Day. Billions mean nothing if you can't get a service.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on budgetary. While mine isn't finalised at this moment in time, I'm still in negotiation with Minister Donnelly for my fair share of disability. And you are right, the priorities have to be the intervention. There's no point in clearing an assessment of needs if I cannot deliver on intervention. So I need more money for therapists. I need to build on the 100 I got last year and the 85 earlier on this year. I need to build on that. But at the same time, we're coming out of COVID. We're not out of it. Respite was closed for most of that, particularly for young people. And we need to build on the capacity. Last year, I secured 9 houses in the budget. 8 of them are built and going into operation. 9th one is happening in December. I need to double that because I've seen how successful it was and what actually it released a valve. It gave breathing space to families. This time my ambition is I would love to have 9 for children and 9 for adults. And that's building capacity into the system without at the same time forcing people into full-time residential care.